Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Before going on my speech, it's best for us to thank God Allah for His mercy and blessing that we can meet here to attend the English spectacular debate today. Praise and salutation may be sent to the last messengers of Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who has guided us from the darkness to the lightness, and because of him, we get the love of Allah in this life and hereafter. Yang kami hormati di sini Kepala Sekolah dari SD Indonesia Interactive Standard School, kemudian Ustadz Ipung Atria, dan moderator sekaligus Dewan Juri, Pak Umar Pradani, kemudian para peserta dan audiens sekalian. Selamat datang kami ucapkan di acara Debat Persaudaraan Spektakuler dengan mosi debat, Do you think online learning is better than offline learning? Namun sebelum itu kami memulai debat, kami perkenalkan dulu di sini ada tim pro yakni Mas Stanislaus Nicholas Dosemon atau bisa dipanggil Mas Niko. Kemudian dari tim kontra ada Mas Mikael Anargia atau bisa dipanggil Mas Mika dari SD Indonesia Interactive Standard School. Baik, langsung saja kita mulai prosesi debat spektakuler ini yang akan dimoderatori dan Dewan Juri oleh Mas Umar Pradani. Time is yours.
A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'inu ala umurid dunya waddin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. I would like to ask the permission to speak in English for the remaining time, since I am the moderator as well as the judge or the adjudicator for this debate. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our friendly debating exhibitions. Under the motions, do you think that online learning is better than offline learning? With the positive team is Mr. Nicholas and the negative team is Mr. Mika. Without further ado, we would like to invite the first session, and for that, Mr. Nicholas, time is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let us define the limitation of this debate, right? I think it would be fair if then this debate is limited to the scope that online learning does not only happen in school in form of formal learning, but also happen in cases like online courses, for example, Skillshare and etc. We think that those online courses are the things that we are going to defend in this debate. But even if, say, opposition team are going to brought me the case of online learning in school, I still think that it is still defendable. And then the limitation that team government are going to defend is the model that formal learning, that the application of online learning, informal learning in school would happen progressively, the shift would happen progressively, and we think the change from offline learning and online learning would eventually happen at the end of the day. Although we think that it would involve a lot of layers of participants, be it from the government or be it from, the mother of our father of the student itself, we still think that it's going to work. And even if it will be expensive, we think the trade-off will be worth it at the end of the day. 2 points that I want to bring up in my case. Firstly, I think it's an integral characterization that school is a place where you're going to be taught. It's a place where the goal of students in school are going to be a capable human being at the end of the day. However, all of the skills that you're going to have, all of the skills that you're going to possess from the school, all of the skills that you're going to get from the school, we think it should be relevant to what we have today, to what skills that we need to have to survive in the modern world and to compete in the labor market that we have today. By that, we think the use of internet and the use of network are very, very integral and are very important in the education system that we have today. I also would like to add that the limitation that this debate applies on, that does not only happen in Indonesia, but we would want to debate on the middle ground in which we are debating in a very in a pretty progressive country, in there is the infrastructure is pretty modern enough to sustain both online learning and offline learning at the same time. By that, we think team opposition and team government would have a better discussion and better discourse at the end of the day. Why then we think that this first characterization is important? Ladies and gentlemen, to set up my first point, I would like to point out the fact that we cannot live without internet. I think all of us here possesses our own devices by our own means, be it from our phone, be it from our laptop, or be it, I don't know, from your iPad, for example, and whatnot, from all of these camera and whatnot. This is why technology is such an important thing for human at this era of age and whatnot, right? Why then we think it is relevant for the skills that we need are going to use in the future. We think that in the future, the exchange of information, the opening up of new businesses, communication, the going into courses and whatnot are all going to be more accessible and are all going to be less expensive if we do it online, and it's going to be much more effective because there are many features under internet and under technology at the very first place. This is why it is important for our students to learn how to properly use your phone, for example, or to learn how to properly use a laptop, for example, and whatnot. It could only happen under government side of the house the moment that we apply online learning. Why? Because under a government side of the house, when the model of online learning is basically habituating the student to do the assignment, to get the assignment, to do meetings and meet the teacher through online platforms such as Google Meet or maybe Microsoft Teams and whatnot, for example, we are habituating the children to use technology more and more and more. At the end of the day, we think children are human beings who are very capable in, creating muscle memory and whatnot. If they are habituated from the very first start in using the smartphone, in using their gadget and whatnot, we think they will have a better time surviving in the modern world in which those technology are so important to begin with. Secondly, I would also like to bring up the fact that there are many grown-ups like us that think that technology are the thing that are rotting our children out of their childhood, for example. That think that those technology are are inherently dangerous and thus we should avoid them. Probably I would elaborate this further down in my speech later on, but I would like,
time is
that's
up.
all. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Nico in his first speech spent 5 minutes and 4 seconds. I would like to invite Mr. Mika to deliver his first speech.
Okay, so I think that I don't agree that that we should not use. I think that the offline learning is still better than the online learning. Why is that? Mostly it's because a lot of reasons, and I have a lot of main points that I want to suggest or I want to explain, and I will do it right now. One of the things is the fact that the online learning requires a lot of self-motivation and the time management skills. A lot of the times, the lack of self-motivation is one of the primary reasons why students a lot of times fail to complete the online courses. And because of this, they pretty much fail the grades, everything. But in the traditional classrooms, there are a lot of factors which constantly push the students towards their learning goals, like the increase of the student competition, and also pretty much the face-to-face communication with the professors or the teachers, and also pretty much having friends. But mostly in the online learning, you're mostly alone and in your comfortable environment. Mostly this is not good because a lot of the times you need a strong self-motivation to pretty much make the best out of the online learning. And next, my next point is also the cheating prevention in the online learning. Mostly in the online learning, if it's about the tests and also about the examinations, a lot of the times, if the teachers are not pretty much paying attention to the students, a lot of the times they will cheat through a lot of various methods, like pretty much using the Google, using the internet,
and many such other things. But in the offline learning, mostly this doesn't happen. There's not that many cheating because a lot of the times in the online learning, they are in their own comfortable environment, and because of this, they are pretty much, they will always a lot of the times cheat in exams or tests or quizzes. But in the offline learning, there are the teachers that pay attention to pretty much the students so that they will not cheat. And also, next is also there are less distraction in the online learning. A lot of the times in the online learning, in the offline learning, there are pretty much less distractions. Mostly in the online learning, there are a lot of distractions. Pretty much maybe you'll get bored. And because of this, maybe you're not focused to your screen and you open up your social media, or maybe you'll watch the TV, or maybe watch YouTube, and you will lose time and you will not be focused. And because of this, a lot of students fail to pretty much compete with other students because they didn't focus on their lessons. And I think that because of this, the parents should pretty much pay attention to them more. And also, it's also about the student competition. As I said before, it also increased the interaction between the students, and because of this, a healthy environment is created, and the students that then compete with each other leads to a lot of the times a lot of better learning. And because of this, that's why I think the offline learning is still better than the online learning. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mika spent for 3 minutes and 57 seconds. Now this is the time for both speakers to have 5 minutes in order to prepare their responses. So the 5-minute time will be started now. So you may have your time to prepare how to respond and what to respond to your opponent. While waiting, I think I would like to also, you guys can continue. I'm going to give some clarifications that this debate is not aimed to actually compete or to actually try to contest the two kids based on any certain characteristic, not even the age, not even the religion or any personal other backgrounds. We would like to make sure that this is a very well educated type of event, that we are not expecting or we are heavily discouraging people to offend each other based on personal background such as physical appearances or maybe age or even religion in this case, which is very sensitive, and we heavily discourage that to happen. So I hope that everybody understand that this debate is not the kind of debate that is wild, that is violent, and this is very peaceful and very well educated event. Thank you very much. Please welcome Mr. Nico for the second speech.
My gender pronoun is he/him. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So team opposition gave me 2 points. First being regarding the problem of, the integrity, the motivation, the self-management skill that you need to succeed and to prevail in online learning. How do I combat this? I think team government then would like to answer we would like to defend our setup that we have said to you, that in order for us to shift from offline learning to online learning, we would do it progressively. But in a much more important note, we will want the participation of all layers of actors involved in this process of learning in itself. What I wanted to focus upon on these certain points is to focus upon the actor of parents. Ladies and gentlemen, in the world that we are living today, or in status quo, we see that there are a lot of parents who surrender the education of their children to the school itself. They think that when they enroll their student to the school, they then can just let it be and let the school do their job. We think then this is the kind of parenting that is very selfish and the kind of parenting that is problematic to begin with. We think it is still the duty of the parents to know what the children are learning in school. It is the duty of the parents to know what is the education that are being given to them and how they are progressing through all of this education in its very first beginning, right? This is why then it is much better under online learning. We give you better participation in what form. Of course, we're going to tell the parents that, in online learning, we need your hands in the deck to monitor your children, to be with your children at all time, to be there for your children and to be some sort of second teacher in the home. If the teacher in the Zoom or the Google Meet cannot be there for the children and whatnot, right? We think then this is a much better participation on the hand of the children and on the hand of the parents at the very first beginning, because it involves the responsibility of the parents from the very first start. Second point of rebuttal. Government's opposition side bring me up the point of in which when you go into online learning, that you would not have any friends, right? We think that this is counterintuitive and it would be even worse under side opposition. Why? Because it is much better under side government, the fact that we are learning online. The accessibility that online and internet give us to a wide range of students through all of social media, like for example Discord or maybe for example study group, is what our side are actually championing in the very first place, as opposed to opposition side of those, where studying with the same friend and studying from the same teacher would only result on these students only looking at certain problem on one certain way only. We think side proposition give you a much wider viewpoint and a much wider community for you to access in the very first beginning. I would also like to add to the fact that isn't it much better when we do our education and when we receive our education and then we can apply it directly? We think that integrity, we think that moral value, we think that motivation are what is being taught by school. We think that when it is being forcefully taught by going offline and then doing things that you don't want to voluntarily do, like for example sit for an entire exam for like 2 hours for example, we don't think that there is the best process of learning. We think that the best process of learning is where you can learn and actually control yourself through an online media, for example, for you to uphold your own self-integrity, for you to uphold your own self-motivation. We think that that is then a better source of learning to begin with. How do we counterbalance side opposition problem? We counterbalance side opposition problem by giving to you the mechanism that parents would act as a mediary, as a participant also in those education, where we think those education online learning would eventually be effective at the end of the day.
Okay. Mr. Nico has spent 4 minutes and 3 seconds. I would like to invite Mr. Mika to deliver his second speech as the response. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here to explain that the offline learning is still better than the online learning. And as my opponent said, about the technology, pretty much about the accessibility and the technology. A lot of the times, maybe there's also the technical issues. What I mean by the technical issues is pretty much the access to appropriate technological equipment such as cameras, microphones, headphones, and laptops, and also reliable internet is really a huge barrier in the online learning. A lot of the times, this can really result in a really bad thing. And furthermore, the technological obstacles as like the internet connection being really slow or the lack of sufficient technical infrastructure that may obstruct seamless learning. And because of this, students have a lot of problems attending maybe the live lectures or pretty much the class, the online learning, and also accessing the videos, or maybe taking notes online. And the offline learning doesn't have that problem. mostly it's really rare and pretty much in the offline learning for the students having some trouble, because a lot of the times the good internet is already prepared by the school or something. And also about learning online, I don't think we should learn online a lot of times, because it doesn't fit every topic, like maybe the physical education. And also, it also needs the practical learning. Pretty much a lot of the times, professors and teachers mostly only focus on theory in the online learning. And yes, they learn a lot, but maybe about the practical learning, they cannot do it because they are in their home, they are in their own environment. And because of that, pretty much there is a huge disadvantage for the online learning. Mostly in the offline classes, they can do anything because there's maybe already a sports field, and maybe there's also already a laboratory pretty much there, and you can do experiments or pretty much practice your practical skills. And that's why the practical learning is really good, because the practical learning pretty much is a general intellectual and skill development. Pretty much the practical learning helps the student to learn and adapt rapidly to the daily obstacles and settings. And because of this, it shares a deeper grasp on the offline learning. And also, I would also like to talk about the accessibility. Most of the times, as I say, there is pretty much already everything prepared, the laboratory, the sports field in the offline school. But mostly in the online school, there is nothing. Pretty much, you can only learn it and put it in your brain. You can only learn it as such, but you cannot do the experiment unless you are at an offline environment. And this is one of the biggest disadvantages of it. And also, about the parents, maybe if the students struggling with the school, the parents may help the students with maybe their homework, or maybe if they want to learn something about their subjects, pretty much they cannot do it alone. The parents are there to pretty much help them. So there is technically no problem about sending the students to school unless it's really forced. Unless maybe the parents is abusive, that's where the problem comes in. And because of that, I think that's all I have to say about this round. Thank you, and that's why I think the offline learning is still better than the online learning.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mika. Mr. Mika spent 4 minutes and 35 seconds. Now, this is the final part of the phase, so you have 5 more minutes to prepare a slightly bit of responses, and then finally, the concluding sentence to show the conclusion why the pro or the cons might win this debate. You have 5 minutes, and it starts now. Okay, the time is up. I would like to invite Mr. Nico to deliver his final speech as in response and conclusion.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. To class, I want to bring in this debate. First of all, let's talk on the principal layer, the idea of education. What Team Prop brings to you is the idea that education must give you relevant skills for you to survive in your daily life moving forward in the future. There is no direct rebuttal to this. We think that this point still stands. But anyway, I think it is better when we talk about the idea of better education, because team opposition question the fact that education under side government would really need a lot of integrity, a lot of motivation for it to work in the very first place. How do we combat this? We mitigated this point by saying to you that first, we think that a hand-on education would still be better when those students then tries to actually develop their own integrity on their own will, being voluntarily getting into their own integrity, as opposed to being forced to get into integrity under side opposition. But second, we think then there is still a counterbalance mechanism under side government in form of parents, where parents are exist and their duties are to accompany the children during their education and whatnot. Side opposition then comes into this debate with an interesting point. What about if the parent is abusive? Shouldn't we protect those children by letting them go to school and getting them into their safe place in school? No, ladies and gentlemen. We still think that even in the environment of online education, abusive households are even going to be much deterred under government side of the house. Why? Look at status quo. The fact that there are many children trying to hide their stories from their friends, trying to hide the fact that their home are in such shambles, trying to hide their scars with the long sleeve of jacket that they're going to use to school. We think that those features are what you're going to find under offline education. We think then the chances of the students to hide the scars in their home are much better under offline education. Because, ladies and gentlemen, remember, social stigma still exists under government side of the house. Comparatively to opposition, when we think the nature of online learning is uncovering in broad terms, uncovering your home to some extent, we think then the moment that I think you all can relate the fact that when you are still in a Google Meet, for example, then your mom comes storming into your bedroom, for example. We think that it would be much more prominent under online learning, the fact that we can uncover such cases of of domestic abuse and whatnot. It is much better under opposition side of the house. For the fact when, for example, if these students are unable to come to school online, for example, if they choose to ditch school, for example, then the school would have, suspicion, for example. We think then the moment that the school have such avenue to indirectly observe their environment in their home through online means is where we have the upper hand. But secondly, let's talk in the practical layer, practicality, right? Under side government, under side opposition, they bring to you the fact that when you learn online, we would have no friend. We negated this point by saying that there would be more community and there would be even more protection to those who are socially anxious, for example. Because under side opposition, those who are socially anxious are going to spend their energy trying to survive socially. We think under side proposition, we give you better alternative when those who are socially anxious can focus their energy in the soul learning process in its very first beginning. Secondly, they also talk to you about infrastructure. How, for example, in Indonesia, infrastructure that supported online learning are still not yet there, and how even the nature of online learning cannot support a process of learning that are very practical in the very first beginning. I'll try to negate this point. First, by saying that the moment that there would be a shift to online learning, the government would then have the obligation to give you all of this infrastructure that you need. See how there are trends of decentralization in Indonesia. See how there are trends of development of infrastructure in Indonesia. Because even in an underdeveloped country such as ours, we still think that infrastructure for online learning would eventually be there at the end of the day. And this is why, then, we're so proud to oppose. Thank you. We're so proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Nico spent 4 minutes and 52 seconds for his last speech, and because of that, I would like to invite Mr. Mika to finally send his final speech and end this debating session. Thank you.
Okay, so I would like to talk about the other topics my opponent talked about. First is about the technology. See, the dependence of technology has been pretty much adopted by the younger generation time by time, and we are now highly dependent on the online study. But the technology, a lot of times, pretty much, what if the technology is not good? Pretty much, a lot of times, the younger generation need to pretty much learn technology on their own. A lot of times, their parents won't help, and because of this, maybe they're gonna have a hard time maybe if they don't, pretty much they're gonna have a hard time. And also about pretty much the online learning as a whole, and about the time management. I think that the time management is still really important because one, it's pretty much really important because a lot of the times the time management can have negative effects on people with online learning, and because of this, pretty much it can cause a lot of bad things. And also, I would like to also say about the extracurricular activities with the practical learning. Now, a lot of the times in the practical learning, they can pretty much learn anything with the practical-based learning because they have well-equipped laboratories, sports equipment, and practice rooms. And this is one of the utmost necessity for those students who opted for courses that pretty much can only be done in the offline education. If you are not opting, and pretty much the online education is pretty much limited to mostly only the theorize and theory, and this is a really big disadvantage. And also about the parents, about the domestic abuse, I think that's not really a problem. Most parents are not abusive. If they are abusive, a lot of the times the school will notice pretty early on if they, of course, ditch school. But if pretty much the parents are exposed and found out, the situation is gonna be fine. And also about the teachers, I think that the teacher and student interaction is also really good because during the learning process, it's gonna be really good because as the studies conclude by pretty much the teacher-student interaction plays a really crucial role in both the learning and teaching because the teachers are the ones that have more knowledge, and that can only be untapped when the students pretty much are trying to learn and maybe ask them questions about this subject. And also about the technology issues, as I said before, the technology issues is really a big deal because a lot of the times maybe they don't have a good technology. Maybe they live in a small town, and mostly in that town there isn't any good connection. And because of this, I think that the technology issues still matter a lot because it is really challenging to get good connection on a very small town that is almost unknown to a lot of people. And this is why I think the offline learning is still better, because with the offline learning, you can learn in school without any connections. You can learn it without the phone, the laptop, a lot of the times, and you pretty much don't need it. And that's all I have to say about the online learning and about the offline learning being better than the online learning. Thank you.
Okay. That's the final speech for the debate, and Mr. Mika spends 4 minutes and 56 seconds. Now I would like to tell you the analysis as the judge and also the evaluations. But before that, I think I need to drop the formality. Yeah, it's very stiff, it's not really fun. But then I have to act professionally as the moderator back then. But now I'm going to speak as a judge and also as a debating enthusiast. I've been coaching debate from like 2013. It's been a long time, and I really like to see, youngsters with their ability, which is apparently very surprising for me. Before I go with the analysis, I would like to give my biggest credit for both speakers. They are so awesome, To you can give applause to each other, yeah. Very, very cool, and that is super awesome, especially for Mika in this way, in this time. No offense, Nico, but he is surprisingly good as a elementary school students with that kind of level of analysis, because I personally think that debating is one of the hardest level in English speaking competitions. Compared to, I don't know, like storytelling or maybe news reading or even speeches in itself, debate is far more complex than that. In debating, you really have to have your own personal argument. You really have to pay attention to your opponents, understanding what they say, analyzing that in your head, concluding that in your head, trying to find the response from what they are talking about and deliver that in your personal speech. And to prepare all that within 5 minutes, for an elementary school kid, that is, beyond awesome for me. That is super, unbelievable, which is very nice. Thank you. But regardless of that, I also have to give credit to Nico as well, since Nico also has the consistency in terms of how to perform. And I think it's actually supposed to be a secret, but I asked him to actually not really go all out in this one, because, that's going to be very traumatizing. You don't really want to see him in his full debating mode. He is scary if he shows that. That's why I asked him to be a little nicer and to talk easier. Actually, it's not that bad for him to actually do that, because if he always go all out as a aggressive debater, it is also bad, because sometimes you really have to be a good speaker. And a good speaker is not always all about being aggressive and defeating your opponent. It would be much better if you can actually win against your opponent and your opponent agree to what you are saying and everybody is happy after the debate, That will be the final goal of every debate, because you don't want to be the enemy of your, opponent forever. You don't. You just have to have the battle here and it's finished here. You cannot bring anything home with anger, with hatred to your opponent. Apart from that, I would like to give a bit of analysis about the argument delivered by both teams. Oh yeah, by the way, I think Nico have said several terms that is very technical in debate. For example, the government and also opposition. In debate, we call debating competition as parliamentary debate or debat parlementer in Bahasa Indonesia, which means that it is supposed to be the simulation of the real debating in the government. That's why the positive team acting as the government and the negative team acting as the opposition team or partai oposisi in Indonesia. That's why they are keep on debating to find out the best solution for the country. That's why I say that debate is very, very well educated, because this is a formal type of event that happening in the world. Usually in world we have 3 types of debating system. We have Asian parliamentary system, Australian parliamentary system, and British parliamentary system. But every of the system require 3 or more person for each team. But then we only have 1 person. We usually call this type of simulation or practice as the Iron Man debate system, because you are standing as the superhero by yourself. The positive standing on its own, the negative standing on its own. I think that's a bit of the, recap. The positive team, Mr. Nico here, explain about the idea that online learning is actually something good and we need to shift to that in the future. There are lots of points that I think is good, and there are lots of points that I think is actually supposed to be potential, such as the idea that it's supposed to be the future of our learning, which means that any problem in the shifting from the offline to online learning is something that we have to face. We have to normalize and we have to solve in the future. And it is something that is solvable. For example, the connection issue or maybe the technological problems, that would be something that you should explore deeper in that part. Like for example, you can simply say that you can ask to the audience, for example, is there any one of you here who has not hold any smartphone at all right now? That would be very impossible for people nowadays in the city to have no smartphone. That's why that technology is much more powerful than we think, that we can actually study, we can actually learn, we can actually be successful using that, for example. That would be some of the potential points that I should point out. However, also you missed to respond several points the negative already brought, for example, the idea that the school has more facility compared to your own house. For example, the school has their private gym. You don't have your private gym at the house, right? You don't have private pools, for example. Maybe if you are bloody rich, you have, but it's not the case for everybody, right? That's why that point is still missing. You did not respond to that sufficiently. And the next that I think is a bit questionable is the way you respond the abusive points from the negative. Yeah, I think it's going to be better if you bring the idea of the abusive as if saying that the abusive case always happens every time. Not only when you are having online or offline student, that's always the problem. But the government is never trying to stop abusive family to attack their children. We have Komnas Perlindungan Anak, for example. Be it online or offline student, the Komnas Perlindungan Anak always available, which means that it has nothing to do at all with online or offline education. That's why that would be a better way to react on this and responding about that. I think that's the recap for Mr. Nico in this case, but then now I'm going to move to Mr. Mika, which is, I honestly think that it is amazing for a kid this young to be that fluent in speaking. I think that you could be a very potential debaters in the future. Maybe Nico one day will be the coach and you're going to be the student. I'm too old for waiting for Mika to be growing up. Maybe Nico can continue my legacy. Anyway, the first that I need to address is I like the way that you are talking about the time and motivation issue, right? It is a very potential point. I think you really need to explore that a bit deeper. For example, especially when you are still a kid, your priority is not always correct. For example, is there any kid in the world who doesn't like to play games, right? Is there any kids in the world who doesn't like to watch people playing Minecraft on YouTube, for example? People likes that, right? But yeah, maybe some kids, don't really like to do that. But the majority of the kids really like to do that. And it's very hard for kids their age to not getting distracted, which is a good point you said also. However, I need that to be included into one big point. Like you are talking about the children, their story. I mean, you are children, right? You can talk about how that your friends maybe have the trick. I can actually still on cam with my Zoom, but then I can play game at the same time, for example. Your friends maybe talk about that sort of tricks or any other tricks, because I believe that, because I'm also a teacher, I know that my children and my students also cheat the same way, They love to play YouTube or maybe play games while listening to me, or maybe not really listening to me. They just, stand by on the Zoom and ignore the lesson. Yeah, right? Now, I think that will be a much more detailed informations that you can also bring examples like that. For example, that would be very awesome. And I like the idea that you compare the facility of the house and also the school, which is very interesting. However, only bringing physical education as your example is a bit, it needs more than that. For example, you can talk about how that in chemistry, for example, or maybe in physics, pelajaran fisika ya, you need to do some experiment. But if the teachers are not there to help you doing the experiment, it will be very dangerous, right? For example, if you are trying to boil the water, but there is no adult supervising you doing that, that will be very disastrous. And that is a great point for you to explain, because
I forgot.
Yeah, it's okay. It's your first time and it's already amazing, so I don't mind with that. I accept that. But then, it would be very good if you can actually explore a bit deeper in terms of that. And also, you can also say that online education push the children to be very independent, right? Yeah. But then, it's not suitable for us to push children to be that independent. They still need their parents. For example, they cannot drive their own car. They cannot ride their motorcycle because they don't have the driving license. Why? Because they need their parents to supervise and help them. And the government tell the parents to do that, right? For example, and the government tells the teacher to teach the students. That's why you cannot force these kids to be very independent, because it's not their age yet to be very independent. Good. like that. I think in terms of responses, here's the thing. I mean, responses is something that is a bit hard to build, especially in such a very short period of time, and I understand that. But then I like the way that you are still trying to bring some idea about like teacher is actually irreplaceable. Their role is very significant, especially in the student's life, and I think that is a good response if you can bring conclusion at the end. Okay, so you just need a bit of conclusions. For example, that is why all of our effort in educating these children is going to be failed, because these children cannot actually go on their own. They still need their teacher. They still need their parental figure, which is in this case the teacher, because they are the replacement of the parents. The parents, the parents trust the school to teach the children. But then again, the positive say that the school need the parents to teach the children. Then why the parents needs the school if at the end the parents teach the children themselves? Udah nggak maksudnya? Jadi kayak gimana caranya kalau misalnya mereka ini memasrahkan anaknya ke sekolah, tapi ujung-ujungnya orang tuanya disuruh ngajarin anaknya lagi, kan percuma berarti dong bayar SPP, ya nggak? Nah, itu you can actually bring that as your point of conclusion, which is very powerful if you can bring that. I think that is all for the analysis. I don't think I want to give the winning for this debate because everybody already did a very awesome job. You both win. At least you both win my perspective. Yeah, you both win my heart, let's just say. Because both have already showed that you can actually do a debate without attacking someone else's personality, or maybe exposing someone's, what do you call that, insecurity, for example. You can actually go with the idea and based on logic and also data most of the time, not really have to offend everyone to win the debate. I think this is going to set a very great example for us and maybe for another people who watch, that you can actually debate peacefully and have your brain trained and also educated well without going very barbaric about how you protect your argument. This is also a part for us to understand that tolerance is actually something very good. Listening to your opponent is much more important than only wanted to be heard. That's why I hereby close this debate with thank you for both sides of the house. You may shake your hand and we are going to close the debate. Thank you very much everybody. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for the debate.
Yeah.
Okay, then I would like to say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Well,
wabarakatuh.
I would like to say thank you very much about this event that already held. That in here we can know that we can still do more again in our future. Thank you also for Mas Niko, and then also for Mas Moderator in here, and then also good job for Mika. Even though this is our very first time, that I do believe that we can still be more better than this one. So we hope that in our future we can be more better for many things, not only for the debate but also for anything. So I think that's all from me. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Baik, terima kasih saya sampaikan kepada para peserta yang sangat-sangat hebat dari tim pro maupun tim kontra, kemudian kepada moderator sekaligus dewan juri dan audiens yang sudah berpartisipasi mensukseskan acara debat spektakuler persaudaraan ini. Terima kasih banyak saya sampaikan. Bisa saya akhiri. Billahi fisabilil haq fastabiqul khairat. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Gerakan kurban tidak biasa untuk mualaf di pedalaman. Mualaf Center Nasional Aya Sofya Indonesia membuka peluang ladang amal berkurban dengan seluas-luasnya untuk sasaran mualaf miskin di pedalaman. Ada 3 nilai lebih yang akan Bapak Ibu dapatkan. 1. Kurban Anda tepat sasaran kepada yang benar-benar membutuhkan. 2. Mualaf di pedalaman sangat-sangat senang karena mereka jarang makan daging, lebih seringnya makan umbi-umbian. 3. Nama Anda akan kami cantumkan di dalam laporan video pelaksanaan kurban. Adapun sasaran wilayah yang akan menjadi tempat untuk pelaksanaan berkurban adalah Mualaf pedalaman Silmoy Laklak, Mualaf Bolang Mongondo, Mualaf pedalaman Uwe Malingku, wilayah garis pemurtadan Malang Selatan, Mualaf Kepulauan Sangihe, Mualaf Pegunungan Donggala, dan lain-lain. Dengan ketentuan sebagai berikut.